Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry about the delay. We had a little technical difficulty, but today we are going to cover how to apply for a license. So in today's presentation, we are going to be covering the initial steps to starting a business, online versus in-person for service options. So that is going to be for applying for your license, the application process, required information, review of the application. Once approval is given for the entire application, what to expect next, some resources that'll be helpful after we're complete, and a Q&A at the end. So let us begin. So the initial steps to starting a business. So the first thing we're going to want you to do is decide how you're going to operate your business. Are you going to operate as a legal entity, such as a corporation, a limited liability company, or a limited partnership? Or are you going to operate as a sole proprietorship or a general partnership? In these cases, if you are registering as a legal entity, you're going to go through the Illinois Secretary of State. If you are going to operate as a sole proprietor or in a general partnership, then you are going to register your DBA, or your doing business as name, with the office of the county clerk for Cook County. The second step is you're going to want to register for your federal employee identification number. That is what you are going to do through the IRS. If you are going to be doing any retail sales or wholesale sales, you are going to need to obtain a tax ID from the Illinois Department of Revenue. You will see that commonly referred to on our paperwork as IDOR. So that is the number they are looking for. It is an 8-digit number that is provided from the Illinois Department of Revenue. And then finally, then you come to the city of Chicago for your business license. And then there are options for applying for your business license. One, you can apply online. You can apply online using Chicago Business Direct. You can reach that website at www.chicago.gov/businessdirect. You can also apply in person at City Hall, room 800. That is the Small Business Center. In this case, you would get a ticket. You would meet with a business consultant, and then the business consultant is going to assist you through the process of getting licensed. You can learn more about what it will be like to come to City Hall at www.chicago.gov/business-license and click on the Visit Us tab. So the application process. We'll go through the online process, and then we'll go through the in-person process. Online, you are going to create your application using step-by-step instructions to determine the license type for which you are applying for. The application you use if you're a first-time applicant is new business license application. And then that application will take you through what activities that would apply to your business type. You are going to enter some general information about your legal entity, and then you are going to submit that application for zoning review. And zoning is going to determine whether or not the location from which you are operating is zoned properly for you to operate that type of business. Just so you're aware, zoning reviews online can take up to and beyond 30 days. If you are in more of a time crunch and need to get licensed faster, then we highly recommend you come in person. Once you've received zoning approval online, then you will start the BACP review process. And in the BACP review process, that's where you will get into more information about your actual business. You will get into more regarding the questions you're going to need to answer, tax questions, providing information about your owners, officers, etc. Once you get approval from a BACP reviewer, then you are going to be allowed to remit payment. So that'll be the full payment for your license. And then after you submit payment, any applicable inspections will be triggered. And we're going to talk more about inspections later on in this presentation. In person, a little different. You're going to start with a pre-application that you will fill out. This is called a business information sheet. This will assist you in determining your license type. It's going to assist the business consultant in generating the proper application for your specific business. Once the consultant generates your application immediately gets put into the zoning queue. Okay. So while your zoning is being reviewed, you will be filling out the application, the rest of it in full. Once you have a zoning approval, the business consultant is then going to review your application, make sure that the questions are answered correctly. They will ask for clarification on anything that they consider out of the ordinary or a red flag. Get those cleared up, get everything signed off on, and then that'll allow you to remit payment in person. And then once payment is processed, that will trigger any applicable inspections. So there's required information from every applicant when you apply. So what we are going to absolutely need, whether you're applying online or in person, we need your legal name. We will need your doing business as or your business assumed name. So for example, you may have a corporation that's named in, your personal name or a group name or however that is, but you may be doing business as, Bob's Sandwich Shop. That would be where that's registered. So the name of the business on the door versus the actual legal entity that owns said business. We will need your federal employee identification number or FIN number if it's applicable. Sole proprietors and general partnerships are not required to have a FIN number unless you actually hire employees, etc. IDOR number if applicable if you're doing retail or wholesale sales. We will need a full description of your business in your words. The key is, how do you generate revenue? What product or service do you sell? Your business location address, so the actual location where you will be operating from. A contact that will be available at that location. So it doesn't need to be an owner or an officer. It could be the manager of that location. It could be an administrator of that location, whoever you feel is the city's go-to person for anything involving the business that doesn't need to be addressed at a higher level. And then finally, we are going to need the owner officer information as detailed on the right side of the page. So if you're a corporation, we are going to need to know who is your president, who is your secretary, and any owner with 25% or greater interest in that business. With an LLC, we will need your managing member or your managers. Once again, an owner with 25% or more greater interest. With a limited partnership, we're going to need to know who is your general or managing partners, any additional partners that you would like to have as a signatory on the account. They are only required if declared with the Illinois Secretary of State, or if you want them as a signatory, then they need to be declared. And once again, any owner with 25% or greater interest will need to be declared. For a sole proprietor, we just need the owner's information. And for a general partnership, we need every partner in that general partnership's information. So what do we mean by the required information? So if you are an officer, an owner, or an authorized person to sign on behalf of the account, we are going to need your full name, your home address, your home or cell phone number, your date of birth, and your social security number. And just so you're aware, this is non-negotiable as this is required in the municipal code, section 4-4-050. If in the case of an LLC, you may have a legal entity as your managing member, or it may be one of your managers is a legal entity, or the legal entity is actually the owner of the business. In this case, we are going to need the legal name of the business, the FIN number, the headquarters address, and the headquarters phone number. In the case of an ownership also being the managing member as being a legal entity, we will not accept an application where the only owner / officer is a legal entity. We will need a human being also declared. So it can be either the owner of the legal entity who owns this LLC, that would be ideal, or a manager within the actual LLC that we are licensing. So LLCs can be a little tricky. If you have any questions, we definitely ask you reach out to us in advance. And you can do that actually by emailing businesslicense@cityofchicago.org. And you're going to see that email a couple more times before the end of the presentation. So when you submit your completed application, whether it's online or in person, a business consultant or online, a BACP reviewer will review your application for the following. Your legal entity information. They're going to want to know is your FIN number an active FIN number, your Illinois state file number, so we can see if your legal entity is in good standing or not with the state of Illinois, and then your IDOR number if you are doing retail or wholesale sales. There are going to be some municipal code acknowledgments. Now online, you will see a series of statements that start with an I, as in I admit, I confirm, etc. Those would just be check boxes that you have acknowledged that you read the statement, and it may or may not apply to you. So if it does not apply to you, still check that you read it. If you're in person, you are going to actually answer on a line. Either you're going to use yes or okay, or you can just use your initials. Once again, even if the statement you don't feel it applies to you, you are acknowledging that you read it and you understand that it may apply to you if you were in that situation. One of the most common is there is child support. If you're behind on child support, it can be cause for us to pull licensing if you're not keeping up with your child support. Now, many owners have either don't have children or everything, they're married, everything's fine. Great. Still acknowledge that you read it, because that situation is definitely a situation that could come up if we find out there's been child support issues in the past. And that's just an example of a question that you would be answering that at the time may not apply to you, but you still need to confirm that you read it. And then you will get additional questions pertaining to your business type. So for example, common question is, are you a licensed professional registered with the state of Illinois? And this would be like if you were an esthetician, are you a CPA? Are you some sort of professional that actually has to have registration with the state of Illinois as well? There's going to be tax questions. The tax questions will determine whether or not city taxes will apply to your business. There'll be a bulk sale declaration. So you'll either answer yes or no if a bulk sale was involved. So bulk sale is going to be if you purchase that location outright, including all inventory, fixtures, all that, or if you are purchasing the inventory and the fixtures from the previous owner and you are taking over that location, but you didn't purchase the location from the previous owner. That needs to be declared to the city so that finance can determine whether or not there are taxes due on that. And then finally, The document will be signed off on in person. We require that the signature be an owner, an officer, or authorized personnel. That person does not technically have to be present. If they are not present, we will need their ID, a photo ID, so we can verify signatures align, etc. If you're doing this online, a lot of times online, you may not be the person who actually is going to be the business owner. You're doing this on behalf of the owner. As long as we have documentation that from the owner saying that you are allowed to act on behalf of his business, that's fine. As long as you're an employee, we will also allow family members. However, if you are an expediting company, you need to be licensed as an expediter in order to apply on somebody else's behalf. So your application is approved. What can you expect next? And these are just some common license types that we put together so that you can see what you can expect after your application is approved. So limited business license is what most people refer to as a general business license. In most cases, you're going to remit payment. And then once that payment is processed in the system, the license should be ready for issuance. And if you're doing it in person, you make your payment, you're going to wait maybe about 10-15 minutes. If there's no other issues that need to be resolved, you will walk out with your license that day. A regulated business license may have inspections that go along with it. Examples of regulated business licenses would be like a hotel license, a massage license, tattoo license. These may require additional inspections, and those inspections need to be entered as approvals before your license will be issued. Retail food, similar situation. You're going to pay, you'll have to pass your inspections, and then the license will be issued once we have approval for all inspections. Street performer, peddler, there's typically not anything that needs to be done once payment is remitted, typically, unless there's any outstanding debt that was acquired through the city that has been attached to your account. That would have to be resolved before we'll issue the license. And then any other specialty license, such as liquor, tobacco, children's services, etc. And then just for your knowledge, the common inspection types would be our business compliance enforcement. This is typically with tobacco and liquor. A document review, which is quite common with any license that requires more in-depth, like background checks, so forth. This would be examples would be liquor, tobacco, children's services, massage, hotel. All of those require a document review. License will be issued. And some of the things in the document review would be like individual history forms for the owners and officers showing their work history. Usually it's tied to being fingerprinted. You may have to disclose finances. If you're a corporation, we would need to see your most recent corporate minutes. If you are a corporation, make sure you are keeping corporate minutes to show when your presidents and secretaries are changing, and to document any changes within the corporate structure. The LLC version of that would be your operating agreement. So we may need to see that documentation as well. In a corporation case, we may even want to see the stock certificates for that corporation. Buildings, you have electrical, plumbing, ventilation are all potential inspection types. Finance, if finance is a debt check, so it checks to see if you have any debt with the city. If so, that would have to be reconciled before the license will be issued. And there's terms and agreement and other options that that finance can work through with you should you have any outstanding debt. Chicago Fire Department, if you have anything where you have hazardous material storage, tire storage, wood storage, Children's services requires a fire inspections. Liquor requires a fire inspection. And then public health, typically tied to food, shared kitchens, or health surveillance would be for tattoo or tanning, where it's an establishment that uses tanning beds. If it's spray tan, the Department of Public Health does not need to inspect that site to see if it's compliant. Some resources for you. So, if you have any questions regarding business licenses or zoning, you can email those to businesslicense@cityofchicago.org. Any questions regarding the online platform, Chicago Business Direct, you can email Chicago Business Direct at cityofchicago.org. If you have any questions regarding the Chicago Municipal Code, the easiest way is to search Chicago Municipal Code on your internet browser and look for American Legal Publishing. They publish the entire municipal code for the city of Chicago. And then if you have any questions regarding the other government agencies we discussed earlier, those are the web addresses for those specific government agencies. And now it is time for your questions. So any questions you have, feel free to submit those now if you have not already. What license would a food truck need? So a food truck would require a mobile food license. Mobile food license can be a complicated license because it requires typically multiple visits to the public health department. It's going to require a fire inspection. If you're using any propane, if you're using, I believe they'll inspect it if you're using electrical as well. I am not 100% sure on that. You can always reach out to food@cityofchicago.org. That is the public health food email, and that would be great if you're looking for more information on what the food truck process is going to be like. We also have a lot of information on our website about food trucks where you can go to chicago.gov/business license. Will you provide us with a copy of the last form? If you could do me a favor and clarify what the form is, or you can email business license at cityofchicago.org and we can provide you with the form you were asking about. If your business location is Forest Park, depending on the business type, you are not required to be licensed in the city of Chicago. Certain licenses would be required if you were doing home improvement. So you may need a home repair license, that would be required. If you were operating a tow truck, maybe the tow truck facility where the cars are stored is outside the city, we would still license that. So there's a few reasons we would license you outside the city, but it is not common. Do you need a license as a photographer? If you are selling your photography to the general public, yes, you will need a license. You're going to need a license for at least retail sales of general merchandise. Zoning does only apply to brick and mortar locations and home-based businesses. So if you were getting something like a peddler license or a shared kitchen user license, those do not require a zoning review. If you already have a retail food license, such as a restaurant, and you wanted to add an operational shared kitchen, you wouldn't need to have a zoning review. That'll actually be handled by health. So there's some examples of what would bypass zoning and go directly to a BACP reviewer, or a consultant would work with you the whole time. Waivers are expedited options for lower income applicants. Unfortunately, there is not. The cost of licensing is dictated by the municipal code. So the municipal code determines how much you're going to pay for a license. There is a reduced street performer peddler license if you are 65 or older, if you have a documented disability, or you are a United States veteran. How much does a business license run for an online business? That's going to be dependent upon what the online business does. But typically, an online business is going to be mostly tied to retail sales. I know there's some consulting that's done online. I also know there's some training, like exercise training, that's done virtually. In those cases, typically the license would be $250 for 2 years, but in those cases, it would also require zoning approval in order to move forward. What license would you need for a mobile welder? We don't license welding. Um, I would imagine that's going to go through the Department of Buildings through the general contractor trade license program. If you need more information on that, you can email businesslicense@cityofchicago.org, and we can provide you with the information to contact the Department of Buildings for general contractor um, trade licensing. How is the city working to make this process more accessible for people with disabilities or limited internet access? So, if you limited internet access, you would have to come into the small business center and apply in person. If you don't have internet access, that's really the only way at this time. However, if you have a disability and you have limited internet access, we have worked with a couple of businesses to do it through email and through US mail. It's a lengthy process. We can do it, and it's a lot of coordination. But if you do need special assistance like that, we will work with you to help you get licensed properly. License for a video blog business. Well, if your video blog is getting monetized, so you are making money by having a video blog business, yes, you need to be licensed. If where you blog from is located within the city limits of Chicago. Now, for those of you who might say, well, I do it all through my phone or I do it all through a laptop, that means you require data. So wherever the address is on your data bill monthly, that is the address from which you would apply. So a consulting or marketing company. So a license for a consulting or marketing company would, in most cases, either be a limited business license because you have a traditional brick and mortar location, or a regulated business license if you're a home-based business. And the only reason it's a regulated license is because it's a home-based business. There's no additional inspections. As long as you get a zoning approval, as long as there's no other outstanding issues with the city, and you have paid your full fee, um, signed off on by a business consultant, that's typically a quick turnaround process. But what I always say is I can't guarantee that any time limit on an application. I know that I saw a question that's going to be upcoming that is about how long does it take to get a liquor license. That's going to be determined upon your engagement throughout the process, because it is a lengthy process. And I've seen liquor licenses that take a year. I've seen liquor licenses that have gotten issued in 6 months. I mean, it all ranges based on how engaged you are in the process. So, question, if you are a sole proprietor, is the business location just where you live? Well, a sole proprietor is based on what your business type is. I mean, there's sole proprietors who run restaurants in the city that they don't run it under a legal entity, they run it under their name. So a sole proprietor business location isn't necessarily where you live. You can lease a business and still run it as a sole proprietor. You don't have to run it as a legal entity or a partnership. If you're looking for the table of licensing fees, that is available through the Chicago Municipal Code. We also have a fee table available on our website, which once again is chicago.gov/business license. Um, and that is on I believe the link you will click on is license types, and that will give you the fee table is within that. So a business license for question here about business license for digital marketing services would be the same as if you were operating from a brick and mortar location, then you would need a limited business license to operate that. It would be a limited business license with the business activity of marketing, or you could do it as a home-based business as long as you have zoning approval, and then that's in both cases if you have zoning approval. If you have a payment plan for parking tickets, does it interfere with your ability to get a business license? As long as your payment plan is current, then and is in good standing, that should not interfere with your ability to get a license. Do different licenses determine different fees? Absolutely. So the most common fee for a license, and it's for most regulated business licenses and all limited business licenses, is $250 for 2 years. However, licenses sometimes are based on square footage, such as retail food. Some are based, also commercial garages are based on square footage. Some are based on, like hotel is based on how many rooms you have. So there's other determining factors into license types. And then, um, for example, a liquor license can cost, I believe it is $4,400 for 2 years for a liquor license. So yes, license fees change based on the license type that you have. Are there any income, residency, or business type restrictions we should be aware of? Um, Other than the restrictions through the municipal code of what can operate in certain zones, or um, if there was a document review and there was a question about funding, I mean, that could come into play, but each of those situations is different. So it varies situation to situation. If you had a more specific question, I would submit that through our email address. Once again, businesslicense@cityofchicago.org. What if you are a virtual address? So this is a good question. Virtual addresses have become very popular. Now, zoning will not approve you if your virtual address is just a call forwarding, mail forwarding service. They are not going to license you for a PO box. They are not going to license you for a UPS store box. If you want to operate from a virtual office and be licensed out of the virtual office, you need to contract with a virtual office that can provide a dedicated or shared workspace, access to office equipment such as copiers, scanners, etc., access to boardrooms or conference rooms, So it needs to be an actual office that you would go into and have a space from which you would work. But if you just sign up for the virtual office, because virtual offices also have call forwarding and mail forwarding, if you are signing up just for that, zoning will not approve you. They want it as that is an actual location where your business can operate from. Does a notary public office need a license? If you're doing notary public, no, you are not required to have a license. Can you have multiple business licenses? Yes. In fact, some businesses have multiple business licenses. For example, if a restaurant is a sit down restaurant that also has alcohol on the menu, they have a liquor license, they have a retail food license, and they may have other licenses based on if they have an outdoor patio, they may have a license for that. Maybe they offer, live entertainment, then they may have a public place of amusement license. So one business in and of itself could have several licenses, but yes, you can have multiple business licenses all under the same account too. So we set it up that if you start your first business and then you decide to expand and open up a second location, you will still do that under your same account number. We will just add what is called a second site to your business account. And then we will continue adding sites. If you move your location, then we will move that to a new site. And then you would have to reapply because licenses are not transferable. So yeah, there's multiple business licenses is not an issue. So once again, cost for an online business again, in most cases, it's going to be $250 for 2 years. There are other factors that fall into that, but that is the most common. Your iDoor number, should you obtain it right before you start? Once you obtain your iDoor number, you are going to have to start filing your sales tax filings with the Illinois Department of Revenue. So typically, we say you should do that probably right before you start the licensing process with us. Your EIN, in most cases, you're going to get your EIN right around the same time you're setting up your LLC or your corporation because the state's going to want that on file. Just so you know, if you're not familiar with EIN, your EIN is your legal entity's social security number. If you're a sole proprietor and you have an EIN because you have employees, that's the social security number for your business. So if you were to change it, if you were to move on from it and your EIN changes, then you have to completely reapply with the city, just so you're aware. To check if a business name is available, you will need to contact the Cook County Records Office. You can also contact the Illinois Secretary of State, just in case there are issues with other businesses outside of Cook County that are still in the state of Illinois where there could be an infringement there. But yes, you follow up with the county and the state. Is there such a license for a mobile tire shop? A mobile tire shop would not be allowed in the city of Chicago. We get a lot of questions about mobile businesses. Food is allowed. Food trucks are allowed as long as they go through the process and are licensed properly. A mobile merchant, so essentially a store on wheels. Your patrons have to be able to enter the back of the vehicle and be able to shop inside the vehicle. So, but mobile merchant would be allowed. Other mobile businesses would be like a peddler because you are selling along the public way. You're allowed to have a cart. You're allowed to use your car. You're not allowed to just post up at one spot for a long period of time, but yes, you could drive somewhere, sell for a little bit, then move on to a new location. So But when it comes down to it, there's not a lot of mobile businesses. You have dessert carts, but uh, no prepared food can be done from a cart. So, at this time, hot dog carts are not allowed. Coffee carts are not allowed, and you will see them in the park district, but we don't have jurisdiction over the park district. So, if you want to do a business like that with the park district, you can contact the Chicago Park District, which is parkconcessions.com. Business license for a fashion model. If you're your own business, I mean, if you're literally your own business, then you would need a license, and it would really just be for administration. But if you're contracted or you're working for someone, then you would not need a business license, because the whoever you contract with or whoever you're employed by would have to have the business license. How long does approval typically take, and what triggers a review or a rejection? So, approval all depends on the license type. And I can't guarantee any timelines, because zoning can take longer than expected. There could be an inspection that gets denied initially. So, for example, you're asking about a review or a rejection. So, if you applied for a tobacco license and you're within 100 feet of a daycare, you're going to get denied. If you apply for a restaurant license and you don't have a proper waste management contract, or disposal contract, you don't have proper pest control, that could be a rejection. You wouldn't get denied at that point. You would have to fix it, and then they would have to come back out. So denials are rare, and denials are usually when there's no bending in the municipal code. But there could be rejections that you have to get fixed. You could have an electrical issue, and electrical's not going to sign off on it. You have to repair it, and then they'll come back out there and inspect it. So inspections are going to determine how long a license process takes. If you're opening up a simple retail store, let's say you're selling souvenirs, knickknacks, something like that, that is a very simple process. Once you get zoning approval, if you have your 250, a properly completed application that has been completed by a consultant or completed online, you pay your 250, and your license is typically issued same day. I need a license for metalwork repairs, fence, custom fabrication. So this is going to, so if you're doing it in for commercial work, you're going to have to contact the Department of Buildings General Contractor Trade License Program. If you're doing the work in residential, then it may just be a home repair license. However, if your work requires that you pull permits, then you are going to go the route of a general contractor trade license. We used to have business licenses that allowed you to pull permits from buildings, but no more. None of our licenses will allow you to pull a permit on behalf company or a resident that you are working with. So if your business is registered in another state and you want to operate in Chicago, meaning you want to open up a location in Chicago, so the first thing you're going to need to do is declare yourself as a foreign entity with the state of Illinois. So then you will set up an Illinois entity as a foreign entity. Then you will, if you're doing sales, you will have to get your Illinois Department of Revenue tax ID, and then you would go through the same process as normal. Essentially, you're just already set up if you have a legal entity through another state. And then if you're a sole proprietor for another state, then you would just be applying in the city of Chicago, and you would need a FIN number if you have employees, and you would need an IDOR number if you're selling retail or wholesale. So what if I work from an office from a co-working space? Would it still be a regulated business license? So I think we answered this question earlier, but no, you would not. If it's a co-working space and it's recognized as a co-working space, we zoning would just need to see your agreement, a signed agreement. If they have a signed agreement, you would be licensed out of the co-working space, or what we usually refer to as a virtual office, and then you would have a limited business license to operate out of that space. Can you operate as a home-based cleaning business? Absolutely, you can operate as a home-based cleaning business if you are working on residential only. You can store your equipment at your home as long as it doesn't take up 25% or more, or 25% of your living space, or 300 square feet, whichever is larger. If it does, we typically suggest, secure leasing of public storage space. And as long as we have a copy of the storage space on hand, we can issue the license for home base. Does a business that allows BYOB have to go through the same process as a business getting a liquor license? No, you are allowed to have BYOB, and just understand you are taking on 100% of the legal responsibility should anything happen at your establishment, or someone who was drinking at your establishment has something happen after they leave your establishment. So it is highly discouraged because there is a lot of legal ramification if something goes wrong. But if you would like to run a BYOB, yes, you can run a BYOB and you would not have to go through the liquor license process. What kind of license for a storefront? Well, that's all going to be determined on what the storefront is. If you're an insurance agency, you're not required to be licensed with the state of Illinois or with the city of Chicago, because you're under the jurisdiction of the state of Illinois. But you could be a carry-out restaurant. You could be a candle store. You could be any number of businesses as a storefront. So it's all going to depend on what your activities are. So a stock trading platform, would it fall under finance? So it would be financial services. If you're a bank, or if you would be business license exemption because you're an IDFPR regulated business, then you're not always required to have a business license. But typically stock traders, yes, unless it's operating from a CPA firm or something like that, it's going to require that you're licensed with the city. Can you track the application once it starts? So online applications can be tracked the entire time. It'll tell you the status of what it is. When you submit it, it'll say that it's been submitted for whoever the reviewer is. If it's been returned to you by that reviewer for clarification, you will be able to access it, and then you will be able to see where they've marked it as clarification required, and then you can resubmit the application once you've clarified what they're asking for. But yeah, you can track that throughout. The in-person application, we typically will ask you to either follow up with the consultant you worked with, send them an email, and put your account number on the subject line, because that'll make it much easier for them. There are email alerts about specific things, such as if your zoning is approved, if one of your inspections is approved, you usually get an email generated to you. And then when your license is actually issued, you'll get an email that your license has been issued. All emails are going to come from cityofchicago.org. So .orgs and .nets are the number one cause of junk mail if you have a Gmail account. So if you're using Gmail and you're working with us, make sure that cityofchicago.org is not filtering into your junk or your spam. What kind of business is needed for DJ and party decor? So basically, if you're providing DJ services, um, In most cases, DJ services are going to be under a limited business license. We actually have a DJ booth activity is one of them. But yeah, in a lot of cases, it's more of along the lines of how we would look at like a wedding planner or so forth. So those are all limited business licenses. That's personal consulting. Um, so I there's a question here. What is the zoning rules? That is a loaded question. Chapter 17 of the Municipal Code covers zoning. It has its own chapter, and zoning covers a lot. Every single plot in the city of Chicago falls under a zone, whether it's a residential zone, whether it's a business zone, whether it's a manufacturing zone, etc. So, and then each of those zones have rules that are required in order to operate in that zone. And then there could be rules beyond that in order to operate in that zone. For example, if you are a hairstylist and you are in a B zone, you want to apply in a B zone, and there is another personal service hair or nail salon within 1,000 feet radius of the location for which you're applying, you would be required to get a special use permit. All liquor licenses are required to get a special use permit. All massage licenses are required to get a special use permit. All public place of amusement licenses are required to get a special use permit. So there are a lot of zoning rules. So what's really going to we need to know is what type of business are you running? Where are you located? And then we can give more detailed information that would specifically apply to you. So if there's a consulting service business from a laptop at home with no inventory or customer traffic, well, then your square footage question is going to be how much square footage in your home do you use? And as long as it is 25%, less than 25% of your total square footage, or 300 square feet, whichever is larger, then that is what you would put down for your square footage. Just so you know, for a home-based business, your attic and your basement does not apply to your square footage. So you cannot count your basement or your attic, and technically you cannot operate a business out of your basement or attic in the city of Chicago. Food catering business. So, if you are a food catering business, this is all going to be determined on, are you a restaurant that is doing catering? So, for example, um, Arab Bread caters. They don't need to have an additional license for catering. They are already a kitchen that has been signed off on by the Department of Public Health. They are allowed to cater an event for a business or a residence or however they decide to do that. If you're a personal caterer, then it's going to be dependent upon where you're operating out of. If you're operating outside of the city limits of Chicago and you're properly licensed out there and you're hired to cater an event, you can cater the event. If you're catering it with liquor, it's going to require a caterer's liquor license. But if you're not catering liquor, then it's not going to be required. Now, if you're a personal caterer and you're operating within the city, that's going to be dependent upon if you have a cottage food license, so you can do this out of your home. Otherwise, you would need to have a shared kitchen user license, and then you would operate out of the shared kitchen to do your catering. So catering can be tricky depending upon the type of caterer you are. And that's something where you would probably sit down with a consultant and look at it more, full scale. Once again, you can email us about that, and we will try to provide as much information as we can through email. And then we would actually recommend if whether or not you would need to speak with a. Okay, so if your address is changing and you are a retail license, okay? So, and we're talking as simple as you move next door. That license is non-transferable, okay? What happens though is that when you set up your very first license, your account is your expiration date is always going to be the expiration date that was established with the first account. So if you set up your license on January 1st, 2026 of next year, your license is going to be valid until January 15th of 2028. If you move during that 2 year span, you're going to pay a prorated amount of that cost until January 15th of 2028. So if you're 1 year into it, then your license, if it's $250 license, you're only going to pay 125 towards that. If you're months away, you may only pay, a small portion of that 250. So it's all dependent upon prorated versus when your established expiration date is. So, and since I'm on the subject of licenses being transferable and not being transferable, and I was asked to speak more about this. So, licenses are non-transferable, meaning you cannot transfer them to another person per se, and you cannot transfer them to another legal entity, and you cannot transfer them to another location. So wherever you're licensed as your location, that is the license for that specific location. If you change to another location, your license is not going to be valid anymore and you need to be relicensed at the new location. If you're purchasing a business from somebody, if you purchase the legal entity, the license is under the legal entity at that location. So at that point, you would simply need to do a change of officer and ownership with the city of Chicago. So you're declaring that there's new ownership, et cetera, but it's still operating under the same legal entity. That would not require completely reapplying. However, if you bought the business location but not the legal entity, then you would need to reapply. So the transferability of a license is only in the case of when a legal entity is being purchased outright. Then obviously a sole proprietorship or a general partnership, if somebody's leaving a general partnership, the partnership's disbanded, it has to reapply under if they form a new one. And if you're a sole proprietor, you cannot transfer your license to a family member, to a friend. It's in your name, it's for you, and it can only be for you. So if I started my business in Texas and now I'm operating in Illinois, so same thing. If you are a legal entity, you want to set up your legal entity in the state of Illinois as a foreign entity, and then you would go through the same process of being licensed within the state of Illinois. If you're in a co-working space, as this question asks, then just make sure it's a proper virtual office that offers um, a dedicated workstation or shared workstation, access to office equipment, access to conference/boardrooms. Our licenses do not have anything to do with federal or state taxes. The only thing we do is we do require, if you're doing retail or wholesale, that we have your tax ID from IDOR. That is an agreement we have with IDOR that we will not allow a business to operate for retail or wholesale unless we have confirmed that they have an IDOR account set up. So a clinical research site. So medical gets tricky. It depends on the clinical research. If there is anything invasive, then we would not be involved. If the research is, say, nonprofit and you don't do You get all your money through either donations, fundraisers. You would license the fundraiser if it had like a raffle or something like that. So clinical research, we would need a lot more information about that before I could give you an answer. So if that's something you're looking into, email us and I'd be happy to have someone dig into that deeper for you. If you want to service commercial businesses for cleaning, what are the requirements? So for commercial cleaning, you just have to have a brick and mortar location. Zoning won't approve commercial cleaning as a home-based business. So as long as you have a commercial location, and now we have commercial cleaning services that do it from a virtual office, and they use a public storage facility to store their vehicle, their cleaning supplies, their cleaning equipment, etc. So it can be done through, a location that may not be able to store everything you use. We just don't allow it from as a home-based business. Uh, so a license for real estate consultancy, partner repair and sell. So if you're going down the route of residential real estate development, then you need to be licensed in the city. That actually will require background checks. So you'll have to get fingerprinted for a license like that. But if you're just like a real estate company, then a real estate company just needs a general business license. If you're operating out of your home, then you would need a home-based business license. So if you have a shared kitchen and you're going to move to a storefront, so if you're going to begin a storefront, it all depends on if you still want to use the shared kitchen. If you want to use the shared kitchen, then keep the shared kitchen license. But if you are moving to a brick and mortar location, you're going to need to get the brick and mortar location for whatever retail food you're doing from that specific location. Yes, you can operate a home-based business out of an apartment. You can operate a home-based business out of a freestanding home, an apartment, anything that is considered your residence. But it has to be your primary residence. Your ID has to show the address matching, or we will need multiple utility bills in your name to show that you are located at that address. So if you're consulting from a laptop at your kitchen table, 50 square feet. Think of it as the size of a cube. If you had a desk in a room that you were doing it from, think of how much room that would take. And typically it's about anywhere from about 25 to 50 square feet. So raffle licenses. Raffle licenses are for non-for-profit companies only. And in order to obtain a raffle license, number one, you have to have been established in the state of Illinois for at least 5 years. You also have to be registered with the Illinois Attorney General's office for nonprofit organizations. We will confirm that when we are looking at a raffle application, and raffles are only need to be licensed if your prizes are of value of $50 or more. As far as my understanding is, this video will be available once we are completed today, and they will share more information if what else will be available. The PowerPoint presentation itself will not be available, but the presentation, the recording of the presentation will be made available. Before I call this wrapped up for the day, are there any more questions I can answer for you? So you cannot offer a raffle for the grand opening of a business if they are purchasing the tickets. If they are not purchasing the tickets, if you're doing a grand opening and you're offering raffle tickets as a part of the grand opening and you're going to have like door prizes and stuff like that, that's different. But if they are paying for a raffle ticket, then the only we will license will be is a not for profit. Assisted living and for probation, former inmates who are on probation, they would either set up a single room occupancy license, which that's a very intricate license. So if you're actually looking to go that route, we would need more information. I would have to double check on veterans because I believe we would not regulate that. That would be under the state of Illinois, but I would have to double check that to make sure. So I am not going to hold to that statement 100%. Any questions from email can be directed to businesslicense@cityofchicago.org. Business license email is monitored by supervisors from the Small Business Center. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to that. If you need clarification on anything that if you felt like you were getting conflicting information. If you are licensed by IDFPR, you do not necessarily need a business license with the City of Chicago. In many cases, you don't need a business license with the City of Chicago. We do have a business license exemption list on our website. If you email business license requesting the link, we can also provide you with the link. If you are outside the city limits of Chicago, unless it's something very specific that does require licensing because you're a garbage company picking up trash, you're as I said before, you're a home repair person or something like that. Yes, there are licenses that are required if you operate from a base outside of the city limits, but the majority of licenses that we issue require that you are located within the city limits of Chicago. And with that, we are going to call it for today as the Small Business Center closes in 10 minutes. So I will turn it back over to our outreach team to wrap it up.